Welcome to our panel discussion, which will be very candid and loose, I think it's fair to say. I'd like everyone to introduce themselves because they'll do a far better job. So Guy, would you like to kick us off?
Thanks, Steve.
As it's your home.
Thank you, yes. Welcome to our show, everyone. Finished about 2.5 hours ago, so it was close to the moment we got there. So we are Haiken, manufacturers of workplace furniture. We brought together a cracking range and just basically trying to make workplace furniture better for the dealers and partners that we work with.
Brilliant.
It's a short intro.
Okay.
My name's Dan Moscrop. I'm the founder and creative director of Them. We're an environmental branding agency, and over the last sort of 9 to 10 years, we've focused purely on workspace. And we're really into how brands and culture can be brought to life within the office, basically.
My name's Anna. I'm one of the founders of Hart Design and furniture company Mark Products, and I'm an interior designer and a furniture designer, so I sit on 2 hats, depending on the day.
And I'm Nicola, Osborn, creative director at Basha-Franklin, and have been working in workplace design for about 20 odd years with various different brands, from Nokia back in the day. If anyone here is old enough to remember Nokia, right up until recently with Related Argent. So, and a spectrum of sectors in between there. And today we are going to talk about investing in people, brand and culture, which I think is a topical discussion right now because of the shift we're seeing in workplace design. And we have had various discussions between us. And I think it's fair to say that people-first strategies, there's been a lot of talk about people-first strategies, but what do they actually mean? And I think all the elements that we're going to talk about today, people, brand and culture, are all completely blended. So I think you get benefits and everything shifts from one to the other, and without one you don't have the other, and there's advantages and disadvantages sitting within all 3 of those. So in terms of people, I think a lot of clients are talking about wellness. A lot of people are talking about, clients are coming saying, right, we have a flexible work policy. We have this amount of space. How can we use that space the best possible way for our people? And a lot of the conversation that we're having is user experience. So providing an experience, providing something that is different, that is enhanced, providing so that people choose to come into that space, and what are they going to get out of that space?
And I think a lot of the stuff we were talking about as well was the fact that the power shifted quite a bit from the employer to the employee over time, especially over the last couple of years. And people are certainly making more demands on what they want and expect from their employer, and making more demands on what they're expecting from their workplace to try and get them back.
Yeah.
I think.
Do you see, Anna, because your work is across multiple sectors?
Yeah.
So do you see across the clients that you're working with, like we're talking a lot about hospitality having much more of an influence in workplace, particularly when clients want their office to have a purposeful, events-focused, more kind of connection network space. Do you see across your sectors in education, and you specifically do work in hospitality, do you see that the blend of providing a viable touchdown or workspace, not so much an office, but somewhere where people can sit all day and actually work out of that hospitality space in reverse? Do you see that happening?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So my early part of my career was workplace design, and then sort of second half hospitality. So I sort of seeing when I first started in workplace that there was a space for lunch, and it was just considered, okay, so we've got a canteen. And then tick. Job done. And we've got a tea point. There was, and a print station. So all these things had really sort of quite dry terms as to what they were called. Like you went here and you do, you pick up your
very
print.
Functional.
Yeah, really functional. And there wasn't any sort of, romance in that experience. It was just going to get a cup of tea, and great if you bump into someone. Whereas in the sort of hospitality sector, particularly, we've done a lot of work in coffee shops, which are places where people have come to work, and there is a whole community around that and the way they interact with their regulars. And when places are closed, their regulars really miss them, and they literally have, some of our clients have people who come regularly for their work meetings at these spaces. And then when you sort of now see the office shift is actually trying to bring some of that stuff that happens really nicely in a hospitality environment into the workplace. It's being done as much more of a hospitality experience. It's part of the journey, the arrival at work, actually that you're allowed to hang out in the coffee space now.
And I think you mentioned something really important where you went and got a cup of tea before, and if you bumped into someone, because usually those tea points were tucked away at the back of the core, or they weren't really on show, and like you say, they were in a dedicated location. Whereas now it's, now I think more clients that you wouldn't expect that want that as an event spa or as a more social arrival experience, a more memorable experience when people and clients particularly come in, and they see that as being part of their brand as well. In terms of branding a space, like we were saying earlier, that it's not about sticking your logo on the wall and having all your chairs in your brand colour, right? We all know that, we've moved on from that. But I think now it's much more about how you're utilising your workplace, and how can that really influence your brand and the brand culture. So we've separated brand and culture, but I think the brand culture element is intrinsically linked.
Absolutely. In fact, something we've been working on with Simon, and one of our recommendations early on was to get a barista right in the sort of hub space as you walk into the office. Because at the minute, they're having the same problems most people of trying to get everyone back to work. And what are the reasons for that? And it's that collaboration, it's bumping into people, seeing people again. And obviously, recommending a barista is not really branding, but it is trying to sort of layer in the culture and,
but that's
trying
really
to sort
interesting, because brand, like that brand and experience, like that's what I was saying to you earlier, like when you're talking to clients, how do you get them to understand the brand isn't like, stamp, there's your brand. Like,
you put a sign above the door.
It's more than that, and I think that because as consumers, our branded experience has grown exponentially in the last 10 years. We expect a lot more from a brand, how we're served when we go into a branded space, and actually now that expectation has come to the workplace.
Absolutely. I was just talking to Nikki about that before, actually, that the thing that made me switch from doing branding specifically to branding for workplace was I've always been about brand experience, and it felt for me almost a bit two-dimensional, everything we did. So you'd brand a logo, you create a logo and a brand guidelines and the website, and you are looking at the customer experience to a point. But what I love about what we do now is that it is really much more about employee experience. We're working on a project at the minute which has got this really weird blend of a client experience, workplace experience, almost to an exhibition level, and a huge workspace aspect to it as well. And for me, it's all the sum of all these parts that really does capture your feels. The brand feels, the fact that you want to be in this space. And a few projects we've worked on recently, they've been very different. One was very corporate. I worked on with Nikki that was very specific, really sort of quite toned down. I think in McKinsey, it was quite a toned down, very, very sort of about mission and values and everything. And it was very sophisticated and staid. Whereas we've been working on TJX Europe with Shepherd Robson, and that's much more of a TJX is the owner company for TK Maxx, and much more quirky sense of humour to it. So we had to really heavily layer on sort of quite quirky, almost like a level of humour to the building itself, which was quite interesting.
But I think what's interesting about the brand experience side of things is, I think the recent project that we're working on together now, the fact that we've started the process together has made a massive difference. It's made a massive difference to us understanding, how to utilise that space to the best impact, and what will the brand communication piece be, and what is the impact of what our client wants to get out of that space. So it's quite a specific space in terms of learning, in terms of communicating a piece of work that they want to communicate to a large audience, but they're embedding that within their workspace.
We found a lot actually
to come into that.
Working with interior designers, when we do get in a bit earlier, we find the client understands brand better, where they've got, for interior design, they've got no frame of reference. I'm sure your experience is the same. Well, I know your experience is the same as mine, but in some cases where we've worked with clients where we've literally got the head of legal running a project, and they've never done it before, you know, like, so they've got to learn from scratch.
Educating them at the same time.
Some you've got a workplace strategist, and it's a very different experience as well. But quite often you might be working with people who've never done this before, and it's probably quite terrifying for them. And they're obviously brilliant at their jobs and stuff, but they're lumped with this huge projects to run. And I think when you get somebody like that, it's almost like when you work with the brand and layering it on top of the interior design, they sort of have a bit of something to hook onto and go, oh, I understand this now, and it really helps them understand how to push it forward.
Embodiment.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a handhold.
Yeah.
And I think going down to a granular, when people are actually in the space, you know, is it easy to use? Is it a seamless experience? Is it intuitive? And that's from how you move through the space, how you find your way around the space. So, you know, is it a sign on every wall, Dan?
I thought Anna's point was an interesting one about workplaces as well, where you've got your tea point tucked away and your printer station. You might bump into one or two people, but we're talking quite a lot to our dealers about the campfire workplace. So the images in your mind that a campfire conjures up: warmth, comfort, there's enjoyment, there's fun, there's drinks, food. People want to come. Yeah, exactly. People want to come and be around a campfire and
be with other people. Be
exactly,
together.
Yeah. And togetherness is another point. Yeah, we spent 2 years or a year and a half at least, mostly on our own. Yeah. People want that togetherness again.
I think the variety as well of designing for different people who want different things doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sort of put those things in silos, but you can kind of create within the workplace spaces that people can naturally gravitate towards, so you don't have to signpost it anymore. But if you're someone who is...
Sorry, Dan.
No more wayfinding.
But you might be, if you're the first person who arrives in an empty space, then you're not going to sit like right in the middle and sort of set up camp necessarily. You might, and then I might
on the table.
I might go against the wall. But you know that those are the things that sort of like designers can do to support people in their kind of workplace journey, because they're enablers of tapping into the human emotion, which
it's diversity, and I think it's diversifying that landscape. And quite a few offices are only two-dimensional. You know, they've got office space and then they've got the ancillary amenity. And I think now, there's, the high-end office pre-COVID was doing all of those things. It was adding a lot more diversity in the settings, in the typologies. There was agility already in some sectors in terms of role and function. So I think the user experience is not just a one, throughout the industry, we've talked for many years about one size does not fit all, but it's not one solution for all. And there's a multifaceted level of, okay, we have to understand the business as designers. We have to understand who is your team, who is your community, what do they do, how do they fit into the cogs of your business. We've worked with a client that has literally a 50-50 split between editorial, very happy, 90% at home, might come into the office once a month. And then you've got the more kind of dynamic people that want to socialise. Their role requires multiple collaboration. They need to be in the office. They need to have that dynamic creative thinking. And the editorials need to feed into that and vice versa, but not every day. So that's kind of a hard landscape to kind of navigate as an employer, because then you've got, we've got this part of our community work from home 90% of the time. And one anecdote from conversations with that community is the editorials were coming in and going, didn't recognise anyone at Team Drinks, not one person. And they were like, oh, who are you? How long have you worked here? 10 years. She's like, I felt awful. It was awful. So this is where experience counts for so much, because, bringing those people, their role does not require them to be in the office all the time. But how can you entice these people to want to be in the office more, want to connect, see the value in connecting, because it's healthy. And that is part of the people strategies is wellness, and it's an all-round wellness, from providing a space that's high performing and healthy
Yeah.
for people to be in, which links to sustainability, but today is not about sustainability.
Guy, when you
Sure,
mentioned
help us,
earlier
yeah.
that the client who wants to spend a nice amount of money to bring
Yeah.
people back to the office, as part of that conversation, is that addressing their home working as part of that, or was it a kind of, we want people...
The impression I got,
back?
yeah, it was a government department, I don't know which, but from Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's comments recently, all civil servants are working from home.
Or I'll sack you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether it was a bit of a, it was just after that. I don't know if it was perhaps a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Quick, we need these guys back in the office. We can't be seen to be working like this. I don't know.
It'd be really interesting how it lands with that, because I think there's that impermanence thing of learning to accept that the choice that they make, like,
Absolutely.
doesn't have to be like, this is for our forever model. It can be more
But
transitional.
don't you think that's down to the culture?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's down to the culture, and I think hybrid is here to stay. To what degree depends on the business, the sector, and actually I think a lot of businesses are navigating that now.
But even the culture doesn't have to be like fixed completely,
exactly.
because I think there's been that shift recently of I don't know if any, like the unlimited holiday, which like, come work for us, we have unlimited holiday,
And then nobody
takes it. And I was really delighted to see somebody the other day say, we are taking away our unlimited holiday.
Yes, I saw
It's
that.
just
Because
Yeah,
people
likewise.
need boundaries, and it's like so they
We're children at heart, we need boundaries.
so some guidance is useful, perhaps not we want everyone back in the office like now, but some level of of guidance around that, so that you've got parameters within which you can
But also from an
exist.
employer's point of view, if you have no parameters, if you have no kind of, actually what we'd really like to do is see you come in twice a week or twice a month or whatever the parameters are, because as an employer, wearing a different hat, you've got to you've got to sustain a culture, you've got to be able to build and generate people making those relationships for your business success. And, a sense of belonging bolsters productivity and people engagement by 56%. So that sense of belonging is really key. And how do you choose as an employer? You've got to make some hard decisions that not everybody's going to agree with, not everybody's going to be happy with.
I do think if the boundaries aren't there, sometimes the business can feel a bit rudderless as well,
Yeah,
So if you're too floaty and nice about, do whatever you want, people are like, well, what's that then?
They need leadership,
Yeah.
and I think it's fair to say every business needs that. They need people to say, well, actually, what we'd really prefer is this, and it either fits or it doesn't fit. And I think we've seen that in the Great Resignation, albeit that there's other factors at play. But I think, where people have made decisions, other people have said, oh, well, actually, it probably doesn't fit me anymore because I've moved 200 miles away.
But we've seen the other end of the scale as well. We've seen the other end of the scale where we've been with, let's say, more autocratic clients where we didn't end up working with them because of it. But they were like, we want 100% of people right back in now, right now, because I'm and it's my business and blah, blah, and they're losing people hand over fist,
exactly.
because there's so many options now and they're just fluid. And the other thing we talked about as well was how to retain your culture when you've got 50% people on and off, and so you got some people digital, you got some people in the physical workspace, and I think there's still quite a lot of transient stuff going on there, and everyone's still trying to find their way of how that's managed. But I think the research I've read is 2 days at home a week's about ideal for retaining that culture and the connections. The silo working is something that comes up a lot in our briefs, where people are working great in their independent departments, but when they're not working together, then it's sort of putting a bit of an anchor on the entire business, because there's not this cross-pollination of ideas and concepts that's pushing stuff through.
That was our recent project, and that was fundamental to their brief.
Really?
They had very clear project teams, and obviously over the kind of COVID time, those project teams were in their own silos, doing their collaboration online.
And they feel like they're working well.
Exactly, and they were productive, and they were engaged. But coming back, it was really hard to see what they'd learned shared with this team and this team, and that was the creative thinking and the innovation. That kind of sharing of knowledge hadn't happened. So that was fundamental to the brief, to provide space where you've got a window to what these teams are doing, and people are interested and engaged in finding out more and bumping into each other at the coffee point visibly, and having those conversations. And I think that's kind of key. It was key pre-COVID, it's not going to go away. You know, that's how we are as people, as
humans.
As humans, exactly. So in terms of user experience, the retail world, the hospitality world, they've been using and tapping into experience. This is not a new phenomenon. You know, the experience economy, I guess. We can learn a lot from retail. They're moved on to the next level in terms of how they're engaging with their brand loyalty, their brand customers. But I think the interesting shift in workplace, like we've mentioned, is hospitality, but also the kind of events, hosting events. And a lot of our clients are talking about opening their doors to people they collaborate a lot with, they partner with. The HQ as a destination for
almost like a flagship store.
Yeah, exactly, like a flagship store. And I think that poses a very interesting dynamic in terms of your purpose of the office. Say office, workplace, whatever our relationship is with that right now.
Space.
But it throws up in the air the utilisation of space. You know, people don't want to walk into a workplace and see rows of desks anymore. They want choice, and they want to be empowered to make that choice. So in terms of furniture, for example, this gives us a massive diversification of what we're using and how we're using it, and how people are comfortable working in different positions. It also throws up ergonomics, which is another talk, so we won't delve into that. But also I think, you know, you've got the level of user experience which you can say, okay, coffee, refreshment will always bring people together. There'll always be that collision culture. You've got collaboration, which is meaningful in everyday work and problem solving and creative thinking. You've got enclosed meeting rooms. You know, all of these typologies and settings provide a utilisation of how people go about doing their day-to-day roles. I think what's interesting is tapping into the personality, which is wide.
Very deep.
And you made a very valid point earlier, which is, you know, I probably would sit in the middle of the bar, but that's my personality. I'm very happy sitting in a load of noise. But, you know, I'd also choose the window seat. Or, you know, I think everybody, depending on your mood of the day, when you arrive, the tasks that you have in front of you, you know, how do you design, or as an employer, how would you even start a brief to say, oh, well, actually, how do we please everybody? Now, there's fundamentals.
I think furniture's, obviously that's like furniture design and the products that people choose and use is a really critical tool in that, because versatile spaces in terms of, so you want flexibility, so furniture starts to look or feel a certain way to enable that flexibility, and then you'll lose the sort of solidity of a space, or the fact that it has a, you know, if it's going to feel like cozy, then and everyone, you know, wants to come in and feel comfortable in it, then you're not necessarily going to be able to make it super flexible. So it does mean that it's not, you can't just build a building and chuck some furniture into it. You have to have
is that not what we do?
Pick some cushions.
Pick some cushions as the interior designers, paint the walls, nice colours.
There you go.
Paint the walls, nice colours, and stick a logo up. But I think furniture design and product availability has, like, obviously product availability has grown a lot, but the product variety is huge now.
Yeah.
Like when I first started in workplace design, we literally would be like, there's the tub chair. That's the tub chair you're going to have for the club space. And it would be the same, project after project. Whereas now, those spaces, they can look and feel completely different just from the furniture that you choose. And that then, you know, means that your job in terms of like understanding what the client needs becomes more important as well, because you need that furniture to last through all those different transitional times that are going to come their way.
Well, I think that's a really good point, is the endurance of the furniture. So I think now going forward, you want to reuse as much as you can. Sorry.
Absolutely.
But you also want to add relevant pieces that will endure through, you know, adaptability. And adaptability is thrown around quite a lot. Flexibility thrown around quite a lot.
And what Anna was saying about, you know, you want that cosy feel, the campfire experience we were talking about earlier on, but that doesn't work with, you know, lightweight
A plastic
table
stacking
that
chair.
flips up and moves around. Yeah, exactly. Things that you can, typically highly agile furniture isn't.
Comfortable.
No, it's not that far, but it's
so
not
cosy.
Cozy, yeah, it's a better word.
Yeah.
But I think the campfire. So you talk about this campfire analogy, and I think what's important to say is that might be one area of the workplace,
it's a gathering
everywhere. And I think that's where we talk about diversity is making sure that you've got. It's like a heartbeat of the office. It's making sure that there's destinations for different moments in the day, in the week. And we were briefly talking about censoring and smart technology and data.
Monitoring people.
Monitoring Big Brother. Never going to sign up for that. But we're already monitored, so, we've all got a smartphone. So.
Yeah.
But we're not getting into that as a debate. But I think in terms of the smart sensors, it's interesting when we're working with clients who want to monitor air quality and want to monitor occupancy, not necessarily perhaps what everybody's doing every day, how many hours they're on the laptop, but what areas of their office is actually being utilised so they can learn from that. And I think that platform for evolution is a really positive shift, that they want to learn and therefore they want elements of their office to be adaptable. I think to your point, anchors are key. You need those anchor positions that everything then pivots around, otherwise it's a mess.
A free-for-all.
It's a free-for-all and there's no structure. But I think the smart technology, I'd love to see technology working much harder behind the scenes to actually provide a much more high-performing space, and therefore it's like a subconscious experience for us all being in the workplace, so that we know it's healthy. We know, if we're all sat in a meeting room, it's getting a bit hot and stuffy. The sense is going, we need more air in that meeting room. All of a sudden you kind of feel that it's working for your best interests rather than against you. Yeah.
I think for me, it just still feels so transitional at the minute, and I think the more data we can have and adapt to, the better. I know there's a lot of fear about how much data we're sharing and things like that, but I think that it's a really key point at the moment that we could be using the information that we're getting in to develop things better. And for me, ironically, we've been banging the drum for years about having a purpose-led office space. And we've got it, And even myself, I know exactly what I'm going to go in to do tomorrow, because I'm going to go to the office and I'm going to get that done and that done and that done. And before you were almost on autopilot, and I'm assuming that's for everybody else as well. You used to go into the office no matter what, sit at your desk, do your stuff, and then come back out of it. And you just sort of fitted the meetings and stuff around it. But I think that when I'm going to be using the office, I'm much more focused on what I need it for. And the things I'm going to be doing at home and what's different and how I'm going to focus my time, which is great.
But I think that's what's quite interesting about this whole time, which numerous people have talked about, is everybody's experienced this. It's not just a certain section of the working world that's experienced it. And one of our pre-chats, Anna, we actually picked up on a really good point, that this whole panel discussion is about the knowledge sector in terms of work. Work is a far wider trajectory of people and tasks. But I think this is very much about a destination.
One thing I've found really interesting, actually, is because of the Great Resignation, and I think that's a massive Americanism, but if, like us, you're struggling to find staff and things like that, where whenever projects we've worked on together and other projects I've worked on, the people we were working for, they were looking for marginal gains. So a couple of years ago, it was literally marginal gains. They were looking for the very best, or they were looking for a specific sector of people they're trying to attract, and that was always part of the brief. And I think now it's literally every workplace. If you want to keep your staff coming in and you want to get your staff in, and you're trying to attract talent, which is a big thing.
Huge thing.
You're gonna really struggle if you've got a crappy workplace.
I think the workplace is becoming that marketing tool.
Totally.
It's recruiting. It's any kind of if we're going to get filmed, we're going to get filmed out of our office, or I think it's a massive connection to the brand. People arrive that kind of threshold. I heard it called threshold anxiety the other day. God,
Yeah,
I
I
like
can
that.
see. Yeah, it's nice.
You know, especially now, you kind of think, oh well, yeah, I suppose there is an element of that for certain, you know, for certain people. Maybe there is that threshold anxiety. It's like, oh God, I got to go in the office. That's probably because they're in an atrocious office. Oh, she's back with another glass of water.
Yeah, I think it's massively a showcase, and you know, even just walking into an office, and it just shows you they haven't got their shit together if they haven't got, you know, it's not all sorted. And TK Maxx again as an example, you know, they're massively into their corporate responsibility, and a lot of the stuff that we were doing was big corporate responsibility messages. You walk through, you can see that they do loads of things with Red Nose Day and Cancer UK, and you would anyone who's going to be a new employee would be walking down this path, and they get all these little things as a point. If you go for an interview, you're sat in a room where it's got a big picture of Jerry Hall and a really positive message. So it's to that level of consideration that the really good people are doing it at. And if you're an other shop that's looking for staff within their head office, and you're going to these 2 interviews, then it's kind of a no-brainer, I think. And
yeah, well, this is, you know, exactly. We have clients, it's intrinsic in their brief that we have to attract talent. We have to be in that talent war, which it is. And I know that the law sector is tanking staff, and the tech sector is scooping all those people up because their workspaces are far more dynamic. The lifestyle is more flexible, you know, and ultimately the law firms are going, oh my God.
what do we do now?
Buildings are really powerful in that, like the impact they make on people. This, on the Elizabeth line this morning, which is very exciting, but there were so many people taking photographs, and it was like they were all sort of, you know, it was just sort of everybody looking around. It's like that's
excited to be there.
Yeah, really excited to be there. Like, and the impact that space has on people, I think, sort of sometimes can sound a bit hippie, doesn't it? To
But I
sort of
think
be
sometimes
that
we
it feels
forget
good, but like it does actually
we
make
are
you
impacted by the space, whether we recognise it or not.
Yeah, and to talk to a lawyer about, like, you know, really want your staff to feel really good when they come to work, and like at one level they're just like, what?
Well, 10 years ago, they were like,
whatever. Yeah, exactly. But actually, that there is
just need gold leaf on that wall.
And then they'll go on holiday for their hotel experience, and they'll want everything to feel really good and nice, and actually, you know, people want to feel good in a space. So,
but I think for that kind of the financial sector, the very kind of what I would term traditional,
old-fashioned.
They've been very focused on client space, and so it was, you know, front of house, back of house, and I think now the back of house just doesn't exist anymore because it's all front of house, because your people need to also feel good. They also need to feel valued, and so investing in that space is just as important as investing in the client space. And actually, you know, there's discussions around in media companies, they would be walking their clients through, they'd have a tour route through the whole office. So media companies and creative companies were miles ahead, as they always are, miles ahead in understanding that the client's buying into the whole business.
Yeah, the ethos.
Not just
what
the
you want.
glittery client meeting.
It's not just
I remember one of my clients, can't say the name of, but they had this amazing reception area. It was like huge, big marble, very fancy, and you had to go down this big, long corridor to get there, really central London. And you were like, this is incredible. And you went up these stairs to the workspace, and it was just desk, rows upon rows, and people just squeezed up together. And I think we were talking about it before, like the way I like to think of sort of the brand and the design aspect of it is it's almost like a Rubik's Cube. When everything's aligned, it's perfect and it feels good. There's everything about it that just gives you the feels and makes you feel amazing. Whereas a lot of the projects we see, quite often even get quite good publicity, that are just a collection of crappy Pinterest boards that could have been scrabbled together by anyone. It feels like someone's mixed up the Rubik's Cube, and when you get into the space, each of the items could be okay on its own, but it just doesn't fit together, and it feels a bit sort of jarring when you get in the space. And I think he's been very careful about things like that. I try and get that balance right, and I think when you do a perfect project and the right teams are on it, that's how it feels. It just all feels everything's in the right place.
I guess what the client's expecting to see when they come into that space as well is important. And Nikki was talking about a law firm, a Google office or a Facebook office. Fine, you kind of expect them to be going around on space offers, but
Haven't they got double-decker desks out the back?
Yeah, they probably have. But then you walk into a law firm, and if your barrister's coming towards you on a space opera, that's not what you're going to be expecting.
No.
That's probably not a great first impression.
Agreed. Yeah, but that's
Probably
not
a slight
what...
exaggeration, but
Yeah.
More
Quite like the
Hurt
idea of
trial.
that, though.
Yeah.
Bouncing up the corridor.
I'm in.
Is there anything you might want to say about investing in people in terms of mentorship?
As in learning and growth.
Yeah.
I think that's a valid point, and I think learning and growth definitely is on that key spectrum of why people would want to be in a workplace. It's only good if other people you're learning from are there too, and that's a dynamic that I think is difficult.
I feel really sorry for people who've just left university over the last couple of years.
Yeah,
I think that's really
absolutely.
quite a challenging couple of
I
years.
got some interesting insight from somebody who works for a data company this morning, though, who's like they've been doing a lot of data-driven research, and because those people started working from home,
They don't want to come in.
Don't want to come in.
Yeah,
so it's like
Wow.
they're more. That's normal. So they're actually quite.
Got a nicer home than I had when I left
maybe they're
uni.
more happy than perhaps we realise because they've had that from the start. So they're sort of, oh no, you need to come in to learn from others, or you need to come in to be with
I
others.
suppose it's quite scary, isn't it? If
Yeah.
you've never done it
But
before.
that's where the threshold anxiety might
Yeah,
be, right?
yeah.
In terms of, I've never been in an office.
Yeah.
I don't know what that dynamic would be.
Is on the tube.
Yeah. Just throwing that in there.
Cocktail bars, fun
Make it an
things,
experience, better experience.
Make it an
than
experience
sniffing
to get there.
Sniffing armpits, yeah.
Nice to be home. The journey is an experience. Yeah, exactly.
But I think that,
All the work
the diversity in age has probably got even bigger than it used to be because people are going to want to, people need to be in the workplace longer.
I think that kind of it's two-way learning. It's multi-generational
Yeah.
across the board. There's moments where I'm like, my technology doesn't work.
Yeah.
Grandma. So I think the learning is one of those things that was quite natural in terms of a team dynamic. Whereas now I think it's probably more thought about and more structured. And I think that's where we'll probably see a new kind of role coming in, because communication now is going to be super key in terms of how people can orchestrate these. I mean, I hate to call them training days, but that communication of bringing people together and making sure they're all in the same place and the right people are there for that interaction and that collaboration and that knowledge sharing, that's a minefield in itself for an employer. So that would be an interesting landscape. Any other questions? No, Alex. Yes, please.
You're saying that's a good thing or a bad thing when you said that because maybe things don't happen just naturally or automatically, you think about it more and plan them more. So that's how I interpreted what you said.
I think that's why people are holding more events, right? I don't think it's a good or a bad thing, actually. I just think it's a shift. It's just different. And I think we do have to think about coming together more than perhaps we did, because 9 times out of 10, most people were there. You would just naturally bump into them. All right, they were in meetings, or you perhaps didn't see people all the time, but ultimately 3-5 days, you would probably bump into people that you needed to see at some point. Whereas now I think it's more of a,
It's got to be orchestrated, isn't it?
is someone
really?
going to be there? Is my team going to be in the space?
It was previously more organic, wasn't it?
It was
now
more
you've got to
organic.
engineer
But
it.
it's just a shift in, you have to maybe organise, as a team, organise your time more to be together, and it's more purposeful when you are together.
I suppose my feeling is that there's a huge loss then because it's like the young people who've only started work in the pandemic years, and as Anne said, have decided that they're quite happy with that. They don't know what they don't know.
They don't know what they're
They
missing.
don't know what it is. An older person at work to say, oh, you might be interested in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't plan, but I might just have a moment one day and, actually, while you're here.
Yeah, exactly.
There's all a day is serendipitous.
I mean, I learned quite a lot just from eavesdropping over the years. Of different, not like that, you know, different designers solving problems, and you're listening to how they're solving.
Even just phone calls and stuff, and how people speak to each other.
Loads of
How do you navigate that client issue? Oh, I'm hearing that they're kind of negotiating that. And you don't hear that when you're sat at home on your own.
Interestingly,
Optimistic,
I did a
isn't
bit
it?
of some focus groups, and one of the groups was PhD students, and they're highly clever engineers, and a lot of the work they do is very introverted and they sit alone. But what they do is a group Zoom call, and all sit quietly, working away, but on Zoom. And then when someone had a thought,
The kids did that when they were at school,
They were sitting, but they just create it virtually.
So there was a lot of kids, older kids, during lockdown that would do that as well on Zoom and on Teams, like an open classroom. So they'd just be carrying on. If they had a question for each other, it would just be more of a natural. It's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
The online office.
Yeah.
Don't know whether I like that or not. Haven't quite thought.
I know quite a lot of sort of freelancers or individuals who do co-working sessions, like on a they do a let's all just be online Thursday morning, and then they chat a bit, and then they just get on with their work, but with their computers on, which is a really kind of, you know, it's a slightly weird thing, but actually, maybe that is a transition.
It's generational.
Yeah, that's.
During lockdown, my daughter, who's in primary school, did exactly that. She used to sit next to someone. They always have a buddy.
Exactly.
So
It's like a human connection.
Someone that they convert with during the day. And
They can bounce ideas around. I mean,
so they just did that online, and I think the kids are better at doing that.
And they're growing up
well, they're
with
growing
that.
up with it, aren't they?
So it's going to not be to them this sort of foreign territory. Like it will just be
Like it is
normal.
now.
Yeah.
Physically, you know, what they can't solve physically, they can solve it digitally, and some Snapchat.
Whatever that is.
What's all that about?
So we've seen a shift more towards companies doing like a 4-day work week now than a 5-day work week. How do you think that's going to affect the whole coming together in office kind of dynamic that we're trying to kind of cultivate?
Will it affect it?
I think you kind of compensate for it, really, don't you? If
We'll have more
I can imagine
after-work drinks on the 4 days.
I could see it probably that you'd, because we sort of toying around with trying to work out how to do 4-day weeks, and I'd probably see it being that you might only be 1 day out of the office, 3 days in. Sorry, Una. And then and then you've got your day off as well. So we were trying to do it. So we try and do like a Creative Friday, so half a day on Friday that you start just doing whatever you want to do. So it's not work related. That we're going to try and grow and grow and grow, so that eventually the day is effectively not making any money anymore, so that we know that we can transition out of it. Although it's taking longer than we thought. So
I think those things are also going peaks and troughs.
Yeah.
Because I had a really lovely couple of months where I was like, Fridays I'm not doing anything like email based, and for a period of time it worked, and then it got hijacked by other stuff.
Busyness.
And things shifting around, and it's like, well, now I feel like I'm kind of might be able to start thinking about doing that again, but it's by saying it and making it, you know, just actually kind of committing to it. I think we'll work.
But aren't we, by committing to 4-day weeks, are we not just creating the 5-day week scenario? Like, isn't it better to just have the flexibility?
That's a good point.
It doesn't have to be like Friday off.
Are we just squeezing everything into 4 days?
Yeah.
I mean, I know.
You'll do 5 days in 4 days anyway.
I think some sectors, that's always like when you sort of see those aspirational, like, oh, I only work 3 days a week now, and I'm doing exactly the same. I'm like, well, you're not maybe in the same industry as me. So I think it is, horses for courses or whatever. But flexibility.
Be interesting to see how that all pans out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a wrap.
Thank you very much, everybody.
We can have a drink.
Drinking coffee again.